Just leave us alone. If you're going to let me do it, let me do it.
Can't let it go. He can't let it go.
Oh, helicopter host.
Have you screwed the whole thing up yet?
Can you
Do I
just,
still have a podcast?
Chris, can you just kick him out?
Yeah, hang on. Stand by.
One sec. Chris, wait. The only thing I asked James, don't f*** up the name of the podcast. It's called Got Your Back.
Got your
Get
arse.
it right.
Gotcha. Why do you have a towel over your shoulder? You're not doing an interview. You're not doing a first period intermission interview.
No, it's
From the workout, I guess.
today's deltoids and calves.
Why is it the cheesy pink resort? Is that?
James, not everybody can afford a villa in Turks and Caicos, all right? Not all of us. Someone took all of the money it felt. We can't all
my
afford
God.
Turks and Caicos.
We live.
Get him out. Get him out, Chris.
Okay. He's the boss today, Ryan.
Have a good show, boys.
People are already
Got
calling
your
it the
back,
best
James.
episode
Got
ever.
your back.
What's going on, folks? Welcome to Got Your Back NHL edition. LeBrun and Rishaug. We've got a great podcast in store for you this week, mainly because I am not going to be on it. Yes, likely I'm sitting toes up on a beach right now with a margarita in my hand. I have pre-recorded this intro, and the plan was for James Duthie to sit in the host's chair and take over duties. The problem is James, not very technically savvy, and if he couldn't figure his stuff out, I might intro James, and it'll be somebody else sitting there. So if that's a little awkward, sorry. That's how we roll here on Got Your Back. And of course, as always, Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug, is brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. They provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry, but what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of the company. I've been to the head office. I've seen it. It's right there on the wall. The employees live by it. They live by that credo because they don't ever want to let the customer down. No excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and we are proud to have them as title sponsors here on Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug. Without further ado, lots of trades talk, trade speculation, great hockey conversation coming your way. Our host this week, James Duthie.
Welcome to the most credible edition of the Got Your Back podcast so far. I'm James Duthie, filling in for Ryan Rishaug, who is at some sort of spiritual meditation retreat in Mexico. He sent me the brochure. It's one of those ones where you get in touch with your body spiritually and sexually. It awakens things within. So I hope that goes well for him. He's needed it for a while. Pierre LeBrun, of course, Mike Johnson. Are you guys regulars? I don't listen to this thing. I listen to true crime podcasts.
It's great. It's great that Ryan thought so highly of my potential as a future host in this business that it was never even a thought. And so, in fact, he reached out to a guy with 74,000 Canadian Screen Awards to replace him. It's good to know.
I actually have a theory that he didn't want me to host this because every time I come on, it's a disaster, both technically and otherwise. But I think he only wanted me to do this, Pierre, because he wants to be able to say that I was his fill-in. So that every time I see him, he can say, "Hey, fill-in."
That's
you
right.
Filled in for me as host. I think it's long been a dream of his. Every time I come on this podcast, things go wrong. Actually, I don't even ever do podcasts from home anymore. The podcast we do, Rubber Boots podcast, we do from studio because my Wi-Fi is so bad. So let's hope it holds together. If not, you guys can take over. Also, the last time I was on the podcast, I don't know if you can you see my little dog?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yes. Yeah. So Willow is I have two dogs. Willow's disabled. She doesn't use her back legs very well. And MJ, I think my only appearance, which makes sense, on the Got Your Back podcast this year, Willow pooped live on the podcast.
But there was quick scoopage from you while we were still chatting about something, although I broke down several times while you were scooping.
Well, the funny thing is I had to do another one, just, somebody else's podcast where you're the guest for an hour later, like within a week or two of that. And she did it again. But this time, I didn't know the person well, and we were talking about some sort of serious matters. So I didn't, like with you guys, I could just walk away and clean it up. But I couldn't walk away and clean it up. And so for the entire hour, I'm in this little office.
It did not let it fester.
Oh, It was just horrible. So anyway, we hope Willow cooperates, and for the listeners and viewers at home, I hope there's nothing revolting. I'll try to block her if anything awful comes out of it. But thank you for having me on, guys.
That was a highlight of the year, pretty much.
Yeah, it wasn't good. Okay, so it's time for the breakdown. Did I get that right?
That's beautiful.
Nailed it.
All right.
The breakdown is brought to you this week by Liberty Smart Security, a company that specializes in having your back. High-quality advanced smart security systems for your home or your business. Liberty Smart Security uses leading-edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Like I said, on a beach in Mexico, I've got the Liberty Smart Security system protecting my house as we speak. Your home is your castle. Protect it with Liberty Smart Security. Visit libertysecurity.ca. Once again, James Duthie.
Word. I got the evil quizmaster sent me a missive. I wasn't even aware.
Yeah. High maintenance podcast today.
Oh, the evil quizmaster, who, for the listeners who don't know, I always talk about him on our shows. He's the guy who kind of ran our show with TSN Hockey, and then he's semi-retired. So he doesn't really hang around much except for the quiz. He throws in a quiz every once in a week. But now he's on this podcast. So it was like this weird deja vu where I woke up this morning and got a podcast missive to follow along with. Because I don't know, my podcast,
the quizmaster made one very sly decision after he took on employment with this podcast. He communicates only with Ryan.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is very smart, because it would be over. He gave me the old text this morning, "You free to talk at 8?" And I'm like, oh God.
No, I am not.
Yes. So anyway, you see, I was worried, I know that this is this is kind of the national version of the pod, right?
I hope so.
Ryan has like an Oilers version,
Mm-hmm.
because I saw the quizmaster wanted us to talk about the Leafs, and I didn't want to upset everybody in Edmonton by being one of those guys who talks about the Leafs, but the quizmaster assured me this is the national podcast and that he felt the Leafs were the main story from last night.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I came home, watched the third period of the Oilers game. I guess they played like garbage for the first two, but just decided in the third, let's go play well and win, which they did. And
They
that was
needed that win.
spectacular.
Yeah.
But MJ was in Buffalo doing the Leafs game. Pierre was on set doing insider trading. And that was, Leaf fans get giddy easy. But when Ryan O'Reilly scores 2 goals in the first 5 minutes, ends up with a hat trick, there's reason to get excited. O-Dog, who was sitting next to me on the panel, tweeted about 8 minutes into the game, "I hope alumni get rings."
Timely.
Yes, which will go over well at every other market in the country.
Wait! They're gonna give out rings if they finally win a playoff series?
They might. They might. What are your impressions, both of you, of the first three games of O'Reilly, and I guess Achari as well with the Leafs, MJ?
Well, I mean, I think pretty good given what we saw last night from Ryan O'Reilly. I think the conversation isn't so much about Ryan O'Reilly and how he can play. We've seen that. We know he's good. It's not so much about Noel Achari, how he can play. We've seen that. It can be pretty good, but more how they fit. And I think that was the big conversation to me. It's not that Ryan O'Reilly doesn't make you better. Of course he does. But like when you put him in your top 6, now you have 3 centermen, one of whom's going to have to play on the wing if you commit to those guys playing together in the top 6. And whether it was Tavares or O'Reilly, how would they do playing on the wing? That was the concern. That was the question for me. It was answered pretty well last night, and even really the first couple games where John Tavares has looked relatively comfortable, and he's gotten around the pocket. He's gotten enough touches. He hasn't gotten lost, which you can do playing along the wall. And then Ryan O'Reilly takes faceoffs. He wins 75% of them. He plays in his own end. And then the worry about foot speed, which I think is genuine between O'Reilly and Tavares, that might have been Mitch Marner's best game as an NHL player, and that is saying something. Like he was incredible. Spectacularly good. And so he can do a lot of that leg work with his feet to drive the pace to maybe help the other guys along a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like. Sheldon Keefe has been tinkering around with his third and fourth line all year long. He loves the idea of Achari on the fourth line. He likes the way it's set up right now. So, yeah, it goes pretty well so far. I don't know, Pierre, if they stay this way forever with O'Reilly and Tavares playing together and don't go 1, 2, 3 down the middle. But for now, I don't know how you could be upset with what you've seen so far.
No, it's been spectacular. I think at some point you got to try the 1-2-3 center setup before the end of the regular season, so that you can go there without hesitation come playoff time, depending on matchups. But I want to get to the playoff matchups because I was thinking of a Tampa-Toronto series right away the last couple of days watching the Leafs with O'Reilly in the lineup. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is that we know from last year's series that John Cooper wants Anthony Cirelli on Austin Matthews whenever he can. Harder to do on the road without last line change, but it's all about the Cirelli and Matthews. This line, if it can continue to, I'm not saying it has to have a game like in Buffalo every night, but if this is a number one line on a lot of NHL teams, Martin O'Reilly and Tavares, it presents a completely different challenge, I think, for Tampa Bay in the first round. And that's the point here, I think. And it's why the Leafs, they'll deny they ever made a trade because of who they're playing in the first round. But let's be honest, they knew the path was Tampa and then maybe Boston.
They'll deny it, but do you think they think about, do you think that actually, it's a weird way to look at things because you're trying to win the Stanley Cup and you have 4 different opponents you'd have to play to get there. But it's hard to not think of the first round because of their history in the first round and because of who they're playing, right?
And I think this presents a more imposing challenge to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, I interviewed Julian Breezeball a couple of weeks ago, and he absolutely said he does not react to what rivals in the division are doing at the deadline in terms of what Tampa's going to do. But, boy, if I was him today, and they don't have – they have no cap room, and they also don't have any first round picks. So the Lightning
never stopped them before.
I think they have to go out and at least for their top 9, whether it's a Barbashev or someone like that, they got to go find another piece if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, because what you're facing here in the first round is pretty formidable now in terms of matchups.
I wonder if the NHL ever gets to the NBA point where in the NBA they're dealing first round picks for 8 years down the road.
Perfect.
Right? In the NHL, maybe you get 2 years sometimes, occasionally the 3 years. But Tampa will be at the point where they're the 2032 first rounder, 2037 second rounder.
Why not?
Something.
Who cares? The draft might not even look the same by then. Let her fly.
I think Keith probably deserves some credit for trying that, because I think the obvious when they made the trade was to go 1-2-3 with the centers. And I know the evil Quizmaster's been arguing to us all year that he should be a candidate for Coach of the Year. I don't think he'll win that with everything that's going on around the league, but that short term 3 games. But
it's interesting, James, that one of the things he did, one of the reasons why he did it was that he wanted to get Ryan O'Reilly, the new guy, the centerpiece. One, playing with the best players, right? So get him with the top 6 guys and maybe not put him down on the third line where he's playing with someone else. And he wanted the new guy to get to play in the middle where he's in his natural position. He was worried or trying to accommodate O'Reilly because he was new. And I guess, allegedly Sheldon has talked to John Tavares over the years about possibly playing on the wing at times. And they do it sometimes out of breaks and out of power plays and penalty kills and stuff. But to accommodate O'Reilly, a guy as accomplished as he is, he was trying to make his transition as easy as possible. That's why they decided to put him in the middle and not Tavares.
By the way, if Jim Montgomery doesn't win the Jack Adams, they will actually retire the Jack Adams.
I am 100% with you on that. We asked a question on the quiz last night, which we've asked before, but I guess the context changed with the O'Reilly deal, which is how many rounds the Leafs have to win this year for the season to be declared a success. Is it ultimately just the Stanley Cup? Getting to a Stanley Cup final, getting to a conference final, or, considering their history, just getting by Tampa? How would you two answer that question?
Well, if it's me, and you got to remember who you're going against, right? So I'd say 1 round. If they beat Tampa and then they lose to the team that gets 135 points, are you going to say of course it's disappointing, but is it a failure? I don't think so. Boston is one of the best teams of all time, and you don't beat them. I think getting through 1 round is such a hurdle. I know they're running out of time with the guys under contract and the team the way it is, but I think if they get through 1 round, that would be considered success, even if they happen to bow out in the second. Won't be happy about it. It'll be another missed opportunity, Pierre, but I think 1 would be enough.
And again, this is why the playoff losses to Columbus and Montreal haunt this organization, because you would look at this team so differently going 7 with Tampa last year, right? But they didn't. They lost to teams they should have beaten in those playoff series. So First of all, I love the question because it feels like the question should actually be asked to the MLSE board of directors, by the way. Because ultimately,
It's true.
how they feel about that question will have a dramatic impact on the offseason. I'll go with 2 rounds because I think if this team wins 2 rounds, it will have beaten arguably 2 of the 3 most imposing teams in front of them in the East, and I'm including Carolina in there. But 2 rounds would be pretty impressive.
I think that I was debating between those 2 answers actually, and I think it's 2 as well, MJ, because you're right in everything you say. You know, the last 6 years, and you're playing a team that's been to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals in Tampa. But I think it'll be really empty if you you make that first step, and no matter who the opponent is, and you're right about Boston, if you go out quietly in 5 to Boston or whatever in the second round, it's almost going to feel as empty for a Leaf fan as losing in the first round.
And James, there's this danger where there's this kind of thought where if they ever get through the first, look out. Burden lifted, they'll be soaring. Here they go, conquered
I've been
all
guilty
the
of
demons.
saying that.
And then if it doesn't go that way, they look the same in the second round as they have previously in the first. Wait a second, that's not how it's supposed to go.
I think if this whole window closes without them winning or without them getting out of the first round, it's that year of the Canadian division is the one that'll haunt them the most.
And the bubble.
Never was a path more clear. Yeah, the bubble too, but that Canadian division year, you were pretty much...
Yeah, that's right. Howl at the moon. That's how easy it was to get to the conference final or the semifinal. It was called back then.
Worst thing is
memories of Carey Price stopping the Leafs, and now we got the barking. Yeah.
My wife is at home, so I have no one to control my dog. So I'm going to ask a question, and then I'll get my dogs under control. We were doing trade deadline stuff, and we tend to focus more on the individual players. Yesterday you were talking about Timo Meier. We were talking about Patrick Kane a little bit. But let's run through the teams at the top and maybe go through, Pierre, maybe you can start with each one and MJ can comment on what do you think they need or they're looking for, starting with Boston.
Yeah, we know the Bruins have talked to Arizona about Jacob Chikrin. I think they've talked to Columbus, from what I understand, about Gavrikov. I mean, the Bruins, interestingly enough, because I like their top 4, have looked at D. They've also looked at some options up front. We know they were in the Horvat conversation with Vancouver. I don't think it went that far, but they certainly talked to them. So I think a bit of both would be ideal for the Bruins. It's an all-in year. But the other thing is, and Cam Neely is on the record saying this, and I know Don Sweeney feels the same way. They're not big on rentals. They've really become this team. Last year they trade for Hampus Lindholm, but make sure they extend him. They trade for Taylor Hall a couple of years ago, but they were really, really hoping they could sign him in the summer, and they did. So they have this sort of forward-thinking philosophy as well, which is awesome because it's why they keep extending their window, but it's also a lot more difficult to pull off. But I think you'll see them at the very least add on D.
I would say depth pieces at most, because I think there's a real risk if you bring in something of consequence, the group, which has been so perfectly in tune with each other, can be disruptive. And I think there's a risk in that might be more impactful than whatever uptick you might have by adding a good player. Now, unless they go get Chikrin, you're like, oh my, how much is too much? They already have enough good players. But I would think, if they go get Gavrikov for the third pair, if they go get a third line winger
or Luke Shen,
whatever,
Luke Shen maybe.
That's it. Because I would be so worried about messing up what has been a perfect thing.
I always, we talk about trade deadline like that. Oh, the contenders have to do something. If you were having, as you called it earlier, Mike, one of the greatest seasons of all time, doing nothing. If the Bruins did nothing at the deadline, would we be standing there when we do winners and losers at the end of the day, going, the Bruins didn't add anything? How can you criticize them if they don't add anything when they've been nearly perfect?
Exactly. They don't have to add anything.
Right.
Sometimes doing less is more. You just being busy for busy's sake. It doesn't make sense. It has to serve a purpose. And right now, there's not a ton of needs. Depth pieces, maybe in case of injury. That's about all you're looking for.
Right. By the way, I'm going, for folks, Western Conference fans, I'm going basically NHL points percentage from top to bottom here. And we'll try to go quickly through them. Carolina is second overall, Pierre.
They have about $10 million in cap space ahead of the deadline, with Max Pacioretty gone for the year, and just the way they've maintained their cap overall. Andre Cossey also at LTIR. So they can add up front, they can add on D. They're trying to do both. They're in hard on Timo Meier. I think they have interest in Patrick Kane. They've looked at different D options. Again, there's another team with a terrific top four, but it's all about the grind of the 4 rounds, and you can never have enough depth. I think the Hurricanes are going to try to swing both forward and D. They really, really want Timo Meier.
They need a scoring forward, right? They lost Max Pacioretty. He was brought in to be that short, quick impact, quick strike kind of offensive guy. He doesn't need a lot of chances. They'd like to replace something like him. And if we're being greedy, maybe an uptick on Kotkaniemi, who's scored a lot better as of late. So maybe they don't feel that need quite as much in the second line center spot. But, they have the money, which most good teams don't. And they have a need as a scoring winger, which Pacioretty was supposed to fill. So pick whoever would fill that void. Timo Meier's the best guy. Kane would be, something if he went down there. He's obviously looking pretty good as of late. So, yeah, scoring winger for sure.
Who wants Meier more, Carolina or Jersey?
Jersey.
Boy, it's close.
Because Fitzy knows. Like, Tom Fitzgerald knows, and he's talked about he loves his players. He doesn't love that they're smaller. Like, He knows they're great. Hughes, Heischer, Bratt. He'd like a guy with a little heft to his game. He got Palat, kind of like that player, but now it's a more skilled, younger, better version of Palat, Timo Meier, to help them. And they have the cap space to make it work for a couple of years if they want to. So I think it's Jersey.
Yeah, and the caveat with the Devils, as we've talked about on Insider Trading, is that they would need Timo Meier to be signed, either right in the moment or at least enough comfort level knowing they could do it within a few weeks. But if they could get Timo Meier signed and trade for him and then find a way to extend Jesper Bratt in the offseason, Bratt, Meier, Hughes, Heischer, holy jumping.
I'll just say this, Pierre. Bratt, who's an entirely different player, would have a very compelling case that he has been better than Timo Meier the last 2 years. So if you trade for Timo Meier and pay him 8.5 or something like that, Jesper Bratt's like, well, there's the absolute baseline that I'm going to take because I've been better than him the last 2 years. I may be lighter, I may be smaller, but I have been better. That negotiation one on the other, and Bratt's pretty stubborn. He didn't take a term deal last year because he kind of bet on himself, and he's lightened it up. That becomes a sticky negotiation with Jesper Bratt.
And we know that the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues and the Vegas Golden Knights have also showed interest in Timo Meier. Let's not forget them. But the thing about Carolina is that they have indicated to San Jose, and I don't know if this gives them an inside edge or it's irrelevant, but Carolina has let San Jose know we will trade for Timo Meier without even talking to his agent or trying to extend him. We're happy just to grab him and worry about the rest later.
Feels like that's the best chance of one of those overpay big bounty deals just because there's so much interest in that guy and he's such a fit on so many different teams this year. Because even like the Patrick Kanes of the world, I don't know, it's specific teams.
And he's got control, right? Timo Meier's kind of willing to go more places. We're able to go more places.
You could get like 6-7 teams in on a bidding war. I don't want to spend too much time on the Leafs because we talked about them a lot. Probably like a depth defenseman, Luke Shen type of situation. I suppose there's still a possibility, Pierre, of something big. If you're going to go all in, you might as well go all in.
I think they'd like to add on D. Those are the conversations from hearing from other teams that are still happening with the Leafs. I mean, Luke Shen would be a possibility. I don't think they can spend up to Gavrikov. Jake McCabe, the Hawks are asking for a first-round pick. Obviously, the Leafs just traded their first-round pick. So I don't know where that is in terms of the
first-round pick 2032.
Well,
I told you.
There we go.
Well, maybe, but it's replacing some of, and MJ might put me in my spot here because this is the old school of me, but I think the concern is replacing some of that Jake Muzzin sandpaper. I think is what they're looking at, the physicality, it's easier said than done.
You need a guy who can play with sandpaper but can also pass the puck. That's the challenge, right?
Sure,
that's the challenge.
Yeah,
an interesting Luke Shen. I was talking to O about this last night. It felt like about 5 years ago, like his career was
on his way out of the league. Yes.
Like he was like that. He was done, and then he goes and wins. Do he win 2 Stanley Cups or 1 Stanley Cup in Tampa? I lose track of who's it. Wins cups and is now sought after as a depth defenseman.
Huge credit to him because he put a lot of new type of off-season work into his game. He I think I don't want to name the wrong guy, but he worked with the development skills guy. Might have been Adam Oates. So what the heck? I think that's what
I think it was.
Yeah, And so you're thinking, what are you doing? Like, that's usually for scoring forwards, but he wanted to improve his mobility and good for him. I mean, that's devotion.
I'll just say this though: if you're going to get Luke Shen, and I don't know what the cost is, like you got to know what you're getting.
Right.
He is a depth defenseman. He does hit block shots. Awesome guy. All the stuff we know. And he may be more mobile, but when he plays with Quinn Hughes, he's got great numbers because Quinn Hughes gets the puck out of the end. When he doesn't play with Quinn Hughes, numbers not nearly as good because he doesn't do that himself. So you got to know what you're getting and put him in the right role for sure.
Other thing is Luke's wife, I believe, is due
any
on Trade Center. Like that's the official due date, which would make the greatest trade interview we've ever had. Like FaceTime from the delivery room.
Gino Reda gets him on the phone,
right? And it's like, and you get like, it'll be like, what's your reaction to the deal? And you hear in the background, ah! And like, no, geez,
you don't want to go to Toronto.
Family's not thrilled with the whole thing. I mean, that would have to the top two trades. Go ahead.
So much for Luke that way, though. Like, there's so much going on in his life right now, and let's face it, in a perfect world, he would have known his fate a month ago, so that they could make all the arrangements that they need. But anyway, I get it.
I was just going to say, I think the most memorable interviews on Trade Center, Chris. Why am I having a brain cramp this morning? Well, Ron Tugnut, I think, was on the toilet when we got him years ago and said he'd been traded.
Come on, really?
Yeah. And then
Chris Campoli? Chris who?
No, I'm sorry, Chris. Why am I bright and brain crap this morning? His brother's on the Rival Network. Come on. He was traded from the Sabres to the Wild. I hope Chris can edit this out.
Chris Stewart.
Chris Stewart, thank you. Chris and Anthony. I'm sorry to Chris and Anthony, who I'm sure are faithful listeners to the podcast. But so Chris gets traded from, I think, Buffalo to Minnie. And Gino, who a lot of people don't know, Gino works behind the scenes getting guys on the line. And he says, okay, we got Chris Stewart on the line. And I'm like, Chris, what do you think of the trade? And Chris says, I don't know. What's the trade? Like, you don't know where you've been traded to?
Oh, I remember this.
No. Yeah. Right? And so that was very awkward.
And then you have a decision to make, James. Do I just say, listen, we'll wait for your call, then call us back? Or are you just like, no, I'm going to do it on live TV?
No, I think he wanted to know, and he was okay with it afterwards. Yeah. But I felt awkward about it because you do remember that there are lives, kids in school and families and things like this. So hopefully Luke Shen from the delivery room on Trade Center. Okay, quickly. Rangers... Pierre, already one big move, already a couple of moves.
Well, so here's, let's get to Patrick Kane in a way by using the Rangers to get to him. And I heard Dregs and the Leafs yesterday. Here's the thing about Patrick Kane. I think that Pat Brisson, and he's probably right, is not discouraged by the fact that the Rangers went to get Tarasenko and the Leafs went to get Ryan O'Reilly. I think Pat Brisson feels deep down that he's got a Hall of Fame client who, if he decides he wants to get traded, which as we're taping this today, he still hasn't decided whether he wants to move, that if they say Rangers, just to use an example, that the Rangers will just try to find a way because it's Patrick Kane. So that he's such a wild card for this trade deadline for so many reasons that it could be a team that doesn't even really particularly need him, but it's like, Patrick Kane wants to come to us. What do we do? And so I'm looking forward to seeing that situation play out if indeed Patrick Kane wants to get dealt.
Is this going to be Jerome McGinley, Mike, where he can just say, this is the team? Iggy had two, and then in the end it was one that he wanted to be traded to.
I don't remember what you're talking about.
Well, the funny thing about that story for anybody who's that was the night Aaron Ward, when he used to be on our panel, had Iggy going to Boston. And it ended up he was going to Pittsburgh. But, Wardo takes a lot of flack for that. But the truth is, I mean, he was wrong in the sense that he didn't get it right.
Hey, the Bruins thought they had him.
The trade had been made. Yeah. Like in the Bruins office, they said, we just got Iggy.
Yeah.
We just traded for Iggy. And that's some source told Wardo that.
Peter Chiarelli, the GM at the time, told his owner in Boston, we have Jerome McGinley.
Right. And then they call Feaster, I believe, was a GM in Calgary, right? Called Iggy and said, we traded you to Boston. And he goes, nah, I don't think I want to go there. I want to go to Pittsburgh.
Oops. At the no trade clause. MJ's favorite.
I mean, Wardo was right, but then he wasn't right anymore. And it's become a long-standing Trade Center gag here at TSN. But MJ, the point is Patrick Kane just going to say, this is the team I want to go to, make it happen?
I think so. And if you're Kyle Davidson, like, what do? Don't you kind of just have to make it happen even if the return is not as great as you could otherwise be? Because if he's not coming back and you can get I don't know, even a second round pick and a B prospect instead of the
Right.
4 pick haul, you probably do it anyways. And I do think the Rangers, who are as good as any team in the league, like literally, they're a fantastic team this year. They could use another top 9 winger. Like they have Jimmy Vesey playing on the, who's had a good year as well, but they have him playing in their top 9. You could slide him down to the 4th line and be a really good checking line and put someone else of consequence in their top 9 if they could somehow get it done and be absolutely stacked top to bottom. So yeah, I don't think it's out of the question that they could make, and if you cut Kane into a quarter, right, you get a half eaten, then another half eaten, and you dump like $800,000 and put a couple people in the minors and carry like 21 guys. The Rangers can do it without jumping through too many hoops.
Yeah, it's like 2-point-something million. Larry Brooks wrote about it this week in the New York Post. The other thing about Kane, and I want to be clear about this, is that it's not going to be, okay, I've decided I want to get traded. Here are 6 teams that I would consider. My understanding is that Pat Brisson and Patrick Kane, and this is similar to Pat Brisson and Claude Giroux a year ago, are going to go to Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks and say, here's the one team that we're comfortable going to. Could you please, if you can, go work out a trade with that one team? So that's a different thing.
Yeah, Drake's brought up the idea, what if that's Toronto? And, Kane was trying to put a cold water on that, I think, while he was in Toronto and scored that hat-trick game, but that would be fascinating. I mean, it'd be fascinating any Canadian team.
Well, then Ryan O'Reilly plays center in the 3rd line. You know that much, right? Like there's your answer. If they get a top 6 winger, there's your 1, 2, 3, 4 centerman.
Right. Tampa, I mean, Julien Brisebois says he can't do much, but he said that for the last 3 years, hasn't he, Pierre?
He has. The difference is he literally has traded all his first-round picks this time in the Brandon Hagel trade a year ago. He did say to me, and I think he repeated it the next day to his media as well, that he would like to go out and get a Nick Paul type player, which is, that guy's been impactful for Tampa. So they are trying to do something. I think if they could add in their top 9, but also add some depth on D, I think the Lightning would be happy. But, and again, I'll give Julien Brisebois credit. He stopped the act of saying we're going to do nothing. He understands we're on to him. But his ammunition is a little more limited than other years.
Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, I won't get fooled again. So yeah. I mean, they'll figure something out. They're really good as is.
What
if Patrick Kane says he wants to go to Tampa? That's my team I want to go to. How do you work out that?
It becomes difficult that he gets traded for 2 third-rounders and a first in 2032.
You know what's funny about that? You know how in the moment, James, you would know this. You're one of the great interviewers on sports TV. A lot of Canadian Screen Awards. When you're interviewing someone, and
it's not a requirement to mention it every time.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you.
Sorry. When you're interviewing someone, and then you're realizing like days later, I didn't even clue into what he just hinted at. We had Erik Karlsson on this podcast about a month ago, I guess it was, and out of nowhere, we were talking about how he really wants to win, and that's going to trump all his other decisions probably. So he clearly is up for a trade if that can ever happen. But out of nowhere, we were talking about how it's difficult to pick your spot, right? Parity and this. And he goes, some teams have no cap room, Tampa's probably. And he just started talking about Tampa. And then days later, I was thinking to myself, he's buddies with Victor Hedman. I wonder how often those two guys text each other. And
wasn't it? I might be having false memories to an extent here, but when Karlsson was the buzz around, I think a couple of different trade deadlines, but one in particular in Ottawa, when he ended up not getting traded, he was our big story all of Trade Center. Then the trade didn't happen until the end of the summer. But his preferred spot was Tampa at that time, I'm pretty sure. And it was, all about him joining his good buddy, Victor Hedman. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, obviously that can't happen now. There's no way that can happen, right?
Not until the summer, at least.
There's no chance Erik Karlsson could go to Tampa. Zero chance in any possibility.
I don't think so.
There's no chance. Okay, let's get to some of the West teams. The highest point percentage team in the West is Vegas. Always an interesting team. At least they have been since they came into the league at deadline, Pierre.
Yeah, they've been all in since day one, and they continue to be. They have Mark Stone's $9.5 million AAV to play with now. I believe they talked to San Jose on Timo Meier. And I think they're another Patrick Kane potential landing spot. No question about it. Or they could turn around if they feel like they don't have the goods to go after a big fish. They could also turn around and be a broker team. I've heard from other sources. So the Vegas is looking at a lot of different things here, and they also have an injury in goal, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what we said about Carolina. They've lost their high-scoring winger. You're never going to replace Mark Stone, a healthy Mark Stone. He's too good, but they have the cap space. They have the urgency to make it happen. I do like that too. Like, listen, they have the money. Even if you can't swing for the fences and get a $10 million player, which they can afford now, like you could broker some deals. You can get some draft capital. You could flip that draft capital somewhere else to make other deals. Right. I imagine they'll go get probably 2 players to try to replace Mark Stone with that money and see what they could do heading to the playoffs.
Yeah, maybe Barbashev makes sense for them, right, MJ? So someone like that.
It's funny, Vegas, like often in the last couple of years, I felt like they were like a serious cup contender, either going into a season or going into the playoffs, and I don't feel that this year.
Who do you feel that about in the West, though, James?
Yeah, nobody really.
I think
Colorado.
The best 6 teams in the league all play in the East.
Yeah, I would say Colorado only because you figure they could just turn it on at some point. And I don't know. If Edmonton could ever figure out goaltending, I still think that.
Sure. But you wouldn't take them over
talent.
any of the top 6 teams in the East,
no,
probably, right?
No.
It's wide open in the West for sure.
But maybe that's the luxury the West teams in the West have. It is wide open. Like there are no great teams in the West as of today. So if you get on a roll, if you get the right mix, a Western team could get to any of the teams that make the playoffs, make the Stanley Cup final. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think the next 2 teams, Winnipeg and Edmonton, kind of got to be both in really go for it mode, right? Winnipeg doesn't often do that. They're especially deadlines. They'll make moves, but don't you feel like because of what MJ just said, Pierre, like this is a time for both of those teams to try to go as all in as you can go? I mean, you don't have a choice if Patrick Kane doesn't want to come to your team, but elsewhere, some of the other guys available.
Yeah, and to the Jets' defense, you just nailed it, James. There are some guys that aren't going to wait to go to Winnipeg, so they've always had the odds stack against them at trade deadlines. But let's give Kevin Shelioff credit; he brought in Paul Stastny one year, who had a terrific playoff. So it's not like they haven't done anything. As we said, the Jets have inquired on Timo Meier, which is quite interesting to me, but it may end up being something lesser. Like I speculated last week, like at the 11th hour, if Genny Daninoff is still there for the Montreal Canadiens, could you get the guy almost for free if you're Winnipeg? Like something to help your forward group. Here's the thing about the Jets. I would be all in if I were them because you don't know how the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation is going to play out for sure after this season. What's the future for Scheifele, Wheeler? This does feel like, we got all the horses right now. We should double down, I think, if you're Winnipeg, if it's possible.
Yeah, almost like the last dance for these guys. Like all the contract expiring, Dubois will be able to call his own ticket wherever he wants shortly. I think they need wingers. I think with Scheifele and with Dubois and Adam Lowry, they need wingers. And so the easiest thing probably to get at deadline time is wingers, that kind of middle 6 guys. Don't have to be superstars. Meyer's great if they can do it, but if not, going to get guys who can just give it a little bit more middle 6 kind of guys, that would help them because they got the goalie. Like that goalie can take them a long way.
Oilers?
They need defense. Yeah. I'm putting it out there. You heard it
Carlson,
first.
I heard you on SportsCenter though. Like Carlson, can they make that work with
Tyson Barrie, Jesse Puljujarvi, $5 million retained. There's your cap space wash contract. Then you have to pay to get him, which will be Broberg and Bourgault and a first.
Yeah,
there's your deal. Like they can do it. Now, if you get
does it make sense? Does it make any sense to you? Well, even though taking my thought of this is time to go for it with the West wide open, does it make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, not to throw guys' names in the mix, but like Tyson Barrie, who's had a very good year again. He's like Erik Karlsson, but Karlsson's much better, right? Like I think you're putting yourself in a jam going forward. You better hope Erik Karlsson can stay healthy. But yeah, I mean, if the cap gets up to 90 in 2 years, next year it'll be tight again, but in 2 years it goes to 90. Yeah, like if you get Erik Karlsson for $7 million, he's going to be a 60 to 70 point defenseman, you'd think, for the next 2 years after this one.
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers...
I think you do. I think you have to give it serious consideration.
Yeah, the Oilers have tried to really... minimize this storyline, I think, because of the enormity of it. But the reality is they've had these discussions with San Jose, and it's absolutely fascinating.
And if he's willing to go, which not everyone would be to Edmonton.
Right. So
selfishly, around 1:30 p.m.
that would be
Eastern,
perfect.
that would
Oh my
be
God.
really good.
Really
that'd be
good.
unreal.
Maybe
I still
earlier, maybe
feel-
11, so we could carry
Listen,
the whole day.
Wow,
with
4 hours.
I
of
hope
sorting through
I'm
details.
wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I still feel like this is a summer trade for the San Jose Sharks.
That's crazy, though. If you're going to go get him now. Get two
That's right.
playoffs out of him.
Get him now. Well, not now. Get him
Well,
in 9 days.
Yes.
I'm saying a summer trade, maybe not to Edmonton. It could be the.
Yeah, I know.
right.
But I'm saying
Other
whoever go
teams
get him.
open
Go
up
get him.
this
He's
summer.
never played better in his life. Go get him now for 2 playoffs.
Well,
I
maybe
know
better that year that they went to the
I know, he
East
was
final
fine.
was pretty damn good.
He's never had this many points. We'll say
Yeah,
that.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, he's probably going to win the Norris if he keeps this
Yeah.
up. The Oilers have talked to Columbus about Gavrikov. Listen, you name a D. We spent a lot of time on this podcast this year with Ryan Rishaug talking about this. They've checked on every D, so they do want to get that done if they can.
And quickly, Calgary.
Boy, as we tape this, 4 points out, inconsistent. I don't know that you could spend a lot of futures here if you're Brad Treliving, who, and I hate to bring this up, but whose own future is, Brad Treliving's contract's up at the end of the year. This has just not gone the way that everyone had planned. Jonathan Huberdeau still trying to find his way, and Jacob Markstrom has not looked good. Boy, I would not be spending a lot. I honestly think this could be quiet for them if they don't start getting on a heater soon here.
I think they just look, James, like we just need the players we have to play better.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of a hard team to change drastically unless you're going to trade a guy, a Hannafin or a Wee, somebody with a ton of term who's a good player. Tinkering for Calgary is difficult because they've tinkered already. They just need the guys they have there who they think are much better and are much better than they've played so far as a group to do that. And they might get in, starting with the goaltender on out. But I don't know what they do, James. Like it's not an easy sort of quick fix. Do this and all your problems will be solved. I think their problems are largely internal.
Right. I don't think we have time to cover everybody. I was trying to cover the teams that are either in playoff positions or just
It's
outside
Colorado,
playoff
though,
positions.
Pierre, real quick, because everyone's terrified of Colorado. When they get healthy, Cale Makar just left again with a concussion protocol, second time. His first game back, and he didn't make
Eric
it through
Johnson's out long term.
What? Are they going to are they going to be aggressive? They have the space now. They can Eric Johnson. They can Kucherov Eric Johnson all the way to the deadline with a broken ankle. They're not making
I love that Kucherov is a verb now.
Yeah, it's my verb. But they're not making it up. He's got a broken ankle. But are they going to go get a second line center? We thought forever they would. Are they going to be aggressive?
JT Compher's played really well of late, by the way, and I know
He'd be really good as a third line center.
Yeah, so yes, I believe they will be aggressive. I think they had some real interest in Ryan O'Reilly before he went to the Leafs. I think Sean Monahan was a guy they were looking at before he just went into this injury abyss. So I think they want to add a top 9 forward. I also think they may add on D. And the reason they might add on D, you're talking about when they're healthy, maybe the best blue line in hockey, but Carolina might differ with that. But I think the recurring injuries on defense this year, now Makar is out. Bowen Byram is finally back. He's playing lights out, but his injury history, Manson is back after an injury. Eric Johnson's out now. I wouldn't be surprised if they add both a top 9 forward and add some depth on D. Colorado wants to have all it can to defend its title. Means a lot to them. Landeskog is skating now. By the way, what a nightmare. Whoever you are in the Western Conference, and if Colorado adds and looks a little healthier and it's mid-April and you just happen to have drawn them in the first game of the playoffs in your own building, enjoy that.
Yeah.
Congrats.
I think they'll make noise too, but I think it's a reminder to us. Tampa skewed the storyline of how hard it is to repeat in the NHL these days because it really is so hard to get back.
Pittsburgh as well.
Because of injury, luck, and everything else, and the grind of winning a Stanley Cup. And I think it reminds us how crazy it is that Tampa's been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals and look good again this year to at least make a run at it. Okay, the final segment of the show, apparently. I have 2 thoughts on this. First of all, the Quizmaster wrote down red flag, yellow flag, no flag. Apparently a red card, a yellow card, no card. Either one befuddles me a little bit because why on a hockey podcast do you use a soccer analogy as a segment? Maybe when Rishaug gets back from his sexual spiritual meditation retreat, in Maya Tulum or wherever the hell he is, he can explain that. But I guess the deal is that red flag means no, right? You're angry with it. Yellow flag means maybe, and no flag means you're okay with it. Is that essentially the premise of the segment?
You got it.
Okay. All right. So Jake Chikrin, Gavrikov, guys who've been scratched from multiple games simply because of trade-related reasons. And now it's extending pretty far. So red card, yellow card, or no card for the GMs who've taken this long-accepted strategy that you can protect assets, even though if they're sitting out multiple games, it affects the integrity of games and of the standings. Yeah, you can go first, Pierre.
I think the tough part in trying to legislate this, and I'm not a big fan of it, but at the end of the day, the coaches in general have the right under the CBA to decide what their lineup is. So I don't know how you come up with a rule that says, well, you can't, scratch Jacob Chikrin 3 weeks out because that doesn't make sense. He's a top four. I think you're going down a rabbit hole that's difficult to contain. It's a yellow flag for me because I don't like the spirit of it, but I don't think there's anything you can do about it.
I'm going to give
You said yellow flag.
Yeah, yellow flag.
Or yellow card, sorry.
Jeez. Now we're doing football and football.
Yeah.
We are mixing all our analogies right now, James. You're messing the whole thing up. Listen, I'm giving no card to the GMs because guess what? It's within the rules. And if I'm a GM, I don't care if they're leaving my team anyways. I don't care about the standings. I don't care about the players' feelings. All I care is about making my team as good as I can make my team. Nobody else's. So no card for the GMs. Yellow card that it's allowed. There should be some sort of language, and there isn't because you can't really dictate that guys have to play. But there's some sort of yellow card for the whole CBA that there's not something in there that precludes teams from scratching guys for trade-related reasons for too long. Like, could you do it for a month, for 2, for 4? Like, it feels wrong, but not on the GM, but just on the situation. So no card for the GMs, yellow for the CBA or the situation.
I think that's fair. I mean, it's going to be tough because you're going to have people making up injuries. The NBA is dealing with something related to this. Yeah.
When the player, when Gavrikov was like, I'm not injured, get me a doctor that says I'm injured. Like, you can find ways like to make sure that to say that I'm not, you can prove you're not injured. Right. If you wanted to.
I'm just saying the NBA is going through a situation now where players are resting all sorts of places, and they'll leave 4 starters home on a road trip or whatever. So fans who've paid whatever this has been going on for a while, but it's gotten bad now. You pay hundreds of dollars to see LeBron or whoever, and they don't even show up, and there's not even any feign of injury, and there's no trades involved. It's just sitting guys in the regular season. The NHL's done a pretty good job. It doesn't really happen in hockey where guys just get nights off. Maybe the last couple days of the year or something.
In the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, but that's about it. Well, let's get the ultimate arbiter on this, Terry Ryan.
When it comes to scratching players indefinitely due to quote-unquote trade-related reasons, like Jacob Chikrin and Vladislav Gavrikov, for example, I'm given a yellow card. I think it's greasy, but now it's part of the game. While I understand the concept for a game or two, teams that scratch a guy for an undisclosed period of time are taking advantage of a situation that, quite frankly, puts them in a better position to draft first overall, this year being Connor Bedard. Sitting out your best players is an easy way to tank. It's nothing new, and there's no real way to enforce a penalty in this situation, so it is what it is. In my point of view, tickets to any NHL game are expensive, and I hate seeing fans get cheated of the best viewing experience because, after all, they're the ones paying the bills. Sitting players also masks injuries they do have, like the situation that unfolded with Foligno in Toronto a few years back. Now, I don't like it, but I think it's here to stay, and it's hard to enforce a penalty. Therefore, yellow card. Final answer.
Or yellow flag.
Yes.
Yellow highlighter. Of all sorts of things we could call this segment. Thank you, Terry. That's why he's the ultimate arbiter. By the way, he teased something about the Bedard tanking that I want to tease. MJ's not aware of this because you can't participate because you're on the road. Pierre, I believe, is going to be making a cameo. I'm very hopeful. I don't want to give away too much, but it's been a few years since we made Puck Over Glass. Been a few years since we made Don't Take My Goal Away, the other hit single. And there might be something coming around Trade Center. Might be something. Might be the band might be getting back together.
I mean,
That's all I want to say.
I'm not going to lie. My two career choices were cover hockey for a living or be a rock star. So,
well, this is your opportunity.
I think you chose poorly. I'd like to see you as a rock star.
Well, I think we may get that opportunity, perhaps, if things go well. I think that I didn't get the podcast canceled, right?
Not yet.
No, I mean, I got through.
Amazing.
I got through the segments. Seeing that this is the first time I've listened to it, actually doing it, I think we did okay. We went through a bunch of teams, probably like Ottawa and Vancouver will be mad at us because we didn't get to them. Montreal, maybe. But hey, there's a time limit on everything. These guys have busy days. MJ with his 94th different background. MJ, I know you're always on the road and such. This background particularly, is this your new house that you've purchased?
This is a new house. Office still coming together.
Yeah, because I was going to say
this picture,
right?
Actually, I quite like it. I purchased it at Saku Koivu's charity event back when I was in Montreal. I did the silent auction and got it. Wow. And although I think my daughter wants it in her bedroom. What is it? It's like a streetscape of
Europe, some European
Tuscany,
town.
whatever. But it's got a bar in it, which is always fun. So, but this goes back to my Montreal days. I've had it for 15 years, but I like it.
Because I was going to say, no offense, because I'm sure your house is beautiful, but at this point in time, this looks like when they either a hostage situation, or if they find like a serial killer or a terrorist, this is what their apartment looks like when the cops break in all the movies I've ever watched. There's like one chair, a little old desk, and
James,
you waited for the final.
You've seen the work firsthand. The designers of my places do. They will be very offended of that. Very offended.
Well, you mean this is the final product here?
Not yet. There's other pieces to come for sure, but
I don't know. I'm just saying that just needs a little more. I'm not sure of the placement of the little white chair. Oh no. Okay, so that's not it. See, I thought that was a desk behind it. That's like
no, it's a credenza.
So Duthie waits for the final. Duthie waits for the final minute to take a swing at MJ. That's like
his dog has emphysema back there. Like, what is he talking about?
You can't make fun of Willow. Look at her. There's been no poops the entire podcast.
I've been hearing her snore the whole time.
Yeah, that's true. These microphones are a little too strong. Hugo only barked one time. Everything's gone well. Yeah. It's been a poop-free podcast. MJ, that I got to take my shots. I really didn't have anything to criticize.
You got a feature in this business, buddy. Great job today.
Thank you guys for having me on the Got Your Back podcast. I probably won't be doing it again. Ryan, have a great. Good luck on your meditative, spiritual sexuality retreat, and thank you everybody for listening. It'll be better next time, probably when Ryan's back.
We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that.